From Ireland to New York City. For once, Sean and Fiona Murphy were grateful for the crowds of people on their street in New York City. It was a freezing cold day in 1858, and all of those bodies helped block the powerful wind blowing from the Hudson River. Fiona told Sean, "Let's go to Uncle Brendan's." And a minute later, they entered their uncle's little restaurant named Murphy's, after their family. The cold followed them in, so they quickly shut the door behind themselves. A familiar voice called out, "Well, now, look who the cat dragged in." It was Uncle Brandon. "It wasn't a cat," Sean laughed. "It was Fiona. I'm hungry, Uncle Brandon." "You're a 15-year-old boy," his uncle answered. "You're always hungry. Sit down and I'll get you each a plate. But, Sean, don't you eat so much that you leave nothing left for my paying customers." Just then Aunt Kathleen came from the kitchen and walked over. Quietly she asked, "How's your ma?" Fiona grew serious. "Not so good, Auntie. She always says she could be used to this cold after living in a drafty one-room shack back in Ireland, but this New York winter is doing something to her. And you know Pa, he never says he's worried, but when he was home last month I could see it in his eyes. I've been wishing he could be home more." Kathleen replied, "He's lucky to have a job. Working to lay railroad tracks out west may take him away often, but his pay is putting food in your mouth and paying for whatever heat we can get in our home." Fiona's family, including her aunt and uncle, had been sharing a tiny apartment ever since they had immigrated from Ireland to settle in the United States. Uncle Brendan's restaurant, Murphy's, was doing well now, but he and his brother Peter, Sean and Fiona's father, were still paying back the money they owed for buying the restaurant. Any money they earned helped the whole family. By now plates of food had appeared in front of Sean and Fiona. Sean breathed in the familiar smells of the food from his home country, Ireland. "Ah, bacon joint and potatoes," he told Aunt Kathleen. "It reminds me of Ireland every time I smell your cooking." "It should," she answered, "since I cook the same foods for you there. Only we had more to eat here. There was never enough food to eat after the potato blight ruined our main food source in Ireland. Even your pa, the strongest man I know, was getting weak from hunger. It's a blessing to come to a country where there's food to eat, the land of opportunity, indeed. Back in Dublin, Ireland, we worked just as hard and had a lot less." "Aye," said Uncle Brendan, "we would never have been able to own our own restaurant back in Ireland. And even if we could have, no one had money enough to be a paying customer. We had so many hardships back home. We complained when we all had to eat in Ireland. All we had to eat in Ireland was potatoes, but we suffered tremendously when the potatoes were no longer there. Our family had to pay a lot of money to emigrate to America, and even with all the difficulty we're going through, it has been worth it. We have a good place to live in a neighborhood of Irish folks like us. Sure, some people have been hostile towards us, but there's more food on our table than we ever had back home in Ireland, and crowded as it may be, I prefer New York City to farming the rocky Irish soil. Still, I do miss a lot of the folks we left behind when we immigrated from Ireland." As he was saying this, the door opened and a voice shouted out, "Well, I'm glad to hear that, Brendan, for we've got no plans to go back." Uncle Brendan's face burst into a huge grin. "Michael Connolly!" he exclaimed. Turning, he saw his old neighbors from Ireland walking through the door. They were new immigrants to the United States now. After a happy reunion, Brendan said, "Sit down all, and we'll bring you a good warm meal." Later, after the Connolly family was full of Kathleen's hearty food, Brendan asked Michael, "Have you a place to stay? And what are you doing about work?" "We are staying with my brother for now," his old neighbor replied. "As for work," he shrugged. "I'd hire you myself," Brendan said, "but I couldn't afford to pay you. But there's a fellow here from the old country who needs wagon drivers to deliver ice in the summer and coal for fires in the winter. No man alive knows more about horses than you do, Michael. I'll take you to meet him. It's hard work, but what isn't? At least you'll be near your new home, not like my brother Peter out west laying railroad track with a pick and a shovel." At this, his niece Fiona said, "But not for long, uncle. That's what I was starting to tell you. We got a letter. Pa says his boss thinks so highly of his work that he's bringing him back to New York City to work in an office." Her brother Sean added, "Pa will be home at the end of the month. He says it's a lucky thing he can read or write, or he wouldn't have been given this new job opportunity. He says it will pay better than building the railroad out west. What's even better is that now he'll be close to home to care for Ma. You should have seen her face when I read her the letter. I think maybe she'll get better now with Pa around." Uncle Brendan nodded. "Aye, Sean, when your Pa is around, your mother perks up like a flower that just got watered. And see how important it is that you and Fiona learn to read and write so well at an early age. One day you'll have better job opportunities than any of us." Sean smiled. "Fiona and I are very lucky now to live here in the land of opportunity, but we'll never forget where we came from and what sacrifices our family had to make to get here." "Well," said Uncle Brendan, "it seems that we all have a great deal to be grateful for here in America. Kathleen and I are lucky enough to own a restaurant. The Connollys are newcomers here. My brother will be with us soon and working a better job. And I believe your ma will get better, children. All in all, I'd say that as hard as the changes sometimes are, coming to America was a good idea."